please state your name and where you work and how long you've been working for?
Andy Creech. I work with the Dare County Sheriff's Office, have been since 1997.
Ed Cottrell, Dare County Sheriff's Office, for about 10 years off and on.
My name is Norman Johnson. I've been in law enforcement with the Dare County Sheriff's Office for 28 and a half years.
Just going to talk to you about stress and how it's affected you in your job. So, having said that, would you say that sudden, extremely stressful situations have affected you more, or just the stress built up over your career so far?
The stress built up, I think, has more effect. I think humans, and my experience, but we're made to handle stress. I mean, our bodies can go highs and lows.
Right.
It's the constant that wears you down.
Right.
So the constant stress, I think, affects me more than the quick and sudden bother me. But one of those ones that, you know, where it's the everyday mundane work and then all of a sudden spikes. I've had those, but not the ones that really affect me.
Okay.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've had ones that would wear me out. I mean, you know, 20 minutes makes me feel like I work a 24-hour day, but not to a point where I'm constantly dwelling on it.
Right.
I would say sudden stress would affect me personally because I don't let stress things build up.
Right.
If I feel something accumulating, I basically de-stress. Well, sudden stress affects everybody depending on what the circumstances. Some people are stressed by minor events, and some people have a higher tolerance, and they're capable of working through higher stress scenarios without being affected.
Right.
I would say the long-term stress has affected me more than the quick burst of stress. Usually in stressful situations that come in a burst, like if you're at a scene and it becomes very intense, you have an adrenaline rush, there's other factors that play in there, and that goes up and you come down, and usually it's good. You deal with it and everything comes out well. The long-term stress has a lot of effects. Like for me personally, I'm a diabetic, and it's really messed up my health. I cannot keep my levels normal due to the amount of stress that you work under on a daily basis.
Right.
So that's why I feel that way.
Right. Do you think that the stress that you're talking about is a problem for most law enforcement officers, or just departments in general, or even a problem at all?
I would argue smaller departments like around here, I think it's more of a problem. I think the larger departments, if you go to big cities where they have hundreds, if not thousands of officers, they deal with the stress that officers go through. Down here, small departments, they don't. I mean, one is resources. They don't have the resources for it to deal with specifically the stress. And then two, there's, I mean, the crime. We've got the same crime. We just don't have the level. We don't have as much. It's the same crime. Yeah, it's just not constant.
Right.
So I think for it to be adequately recognized, it's got to be out there all the time, and it's not out there all the time. I mean, we have it here. It's obvious. You know, if you just talk to a bunch of officers, you'll realize that it's here. They're going to stress, but it's not to the point where anyone's going to want to spend the money on it.
Right.
Outside of your regular health insurance.
Right.
Well, stress is going to be part of it no matter what, but not knowing how to de-stress would certainly be a problem. Because if an officer can't de-stress, then he'll basically explode or implode.
Right.
One of the two. I would say the size of the department could play into that.
Right.
Because you have certain stresses that go with the job, and then you have certain stresses that go with the departments.
Right.
Smaller departments, you have fewer officers that have larger number of responsibilities, and then bigger departments, they have their whole different set of stresses that go with managing a large group of people.
Right.
Yeah. Stress is a big problem for law enforcement officers in both areas, such as we're not trained to deal with situations like high-speed chases, a lot of times officers get in trouble because they'll get in a high-speed chase. Suspects will ram their vehicle. They will run other officers off the road, and then when they get to the suspect and it's over, the stress and everything and the anger that builds up in them, sometimes they can't control their emotions.
Right.
And they end up getting themselves in trouble by being abusive to the suspect or going excessive with the force. And when that occurs, a lot of times I think if officers were trained better to deal with stress, that wouldn't happen as much.
Right.
Long-term stress with officers, I've seen a lot of officers that had issues in law enforcement where the stress gets to them and they turn to alcohol. It's a running joke that if you're in law enforcement, you're going to be divorced at least once in your life. So it wreaks havoc on your family life, with your relationship between your wife, your children. So in that factor there's a lot of stress, and because law enforcement can be, especially for the men, they have that male ego.
Right.
And they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to face it.
Don't want to talk about it.
That's right.
Right.
So that creates a problem for them.
And do you think that all departments should have some sort of resource available for officers to go to?
Absolutely.
For stress problems?
Absolutely.
And like, what resources would you say? Like peer counseling, or just like therapists, or just what sort of resources do you think would be best? Or would it depend upon department?
That's difficult for me to answer, having not being in a position to utilize anything that could be. I've not had, I don't know, I don't know what works, I don't know what doesn't work, so I have no idea.
Right. So would you say that talking about any stress you've encountered or like problems that you've had, would you say that helps at all?
I think it depends on the circumstance, the person you're talking to, how they are. Law enforcement has a lot of black humor.
Right.
And
is that jaded sort of?
Yeah, and I'll go with the flow like the rest of them, but some of the stuff bothers me. The black humor part. So the black humor about everything, I think it helps. But there's certain things that bother me, even with the black humor part. I know it's a joke, but sometimes I get offended or I feel differently about something, and
right.
I may giggle at it, but you've got to deal with it one way or another. Some ways work, some ways don't, and there's not a lot of avenues around here to cope with the stress.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Would you say that better training from the beginning of their career would help probably too? Like better stress management training so that they know how to handle it better?
Yeah. I would say that they should have some kind of, and they do.
Right.
When you go through basic school, they do have different stress management courses, and then different stress courses are also offered later in your career.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely. Some departments actually have it. Resources in place for that, different avenues for them to see psychiatrists. If they start having a drinking issue, they can seek help there with different groups.
Right.
But it's getting over that macho image.
Right.
I don't need no help, I can handle it myself.
So there needs to be some sort of...
Yeah.
Where
Sometimes, I think sometimes law enforcement administration sees things and they should push officers harder to get assistance in it. And here you're dealing with some smaller departments. In larger departments, there's reviews and stuff that people have to go through. But overall in law enforcement, I think the administration section could do a much better job in funneling people into getting help when they need it, instead of sitting back and reacting and people losing their jobs and
right.
their careers.
And how would you say that stress has affected you?
Me personally?
Yeah. In your job, right?
Health. Absolutely. Wears me out. The stress of working, different shifts. The majority of my contacts aren't of the best behaved type.
Right.
I deal with a lot of good people, talk with a lot of good people, but the majority of my contacts are people that not necessarily the best in society.
Right.
Even the people that I am contacting that are of good standing in society, they're usually calling me because they've dealt with somebody who's not the best in society, and in turn I've got to deal with that.
Right.
So just the stress of losing trust in general for people, that's itself is stressful, because I've grown up accepting, liking everybody, giving everybody the benefit, but now it kind of taints you.
Would you say it's made you kind of jaded?
Absolutely.
Right.
Outside of my little circle of friends and family, it's hard to trust people in general.
Right.
I do not have the social life that I used to have, and then if I find myself in a position where I go around a large group of people, just the stress of not being able to trust everyone, or being apprehensive to even start trusting them because I don't know them, that in and of itself is stressful.
Right.
Not as stressful as the work, but it still wears on you.
Yeah, depending on what I'm doing, stress is a good thing, because if I get stressed over a dangerous situation, it makes me more aware of what's going on, and it makes me more careful.
Right. Has it affected you in the long run, like in your personal life, or?
In my personal life, no.
All right.
Because I don't take the stress home with me.
Right.
When I'm done working, I basically leave everything in the car.
Right. Thank you very much for the interview.
You're very welcome.
Well, I'm coming to the end of my career.
Yeah.
And it's I never thought I'd see the day where I wanted to get out of law enforcement.
Right.
And I think that now I'm just about over it, and I'm ready to go. I think it's changed a lot of attitudes in law enforcement. Not all to the good, not all to the bad. But I just think that because of the level of stress that everybody's under, and the way everybody's been handling it, there's no proactive steps being done. So I think time you get close to retirement, a lot of guys aren't going to make it.
Right.
Or when they go out, they're going to have a lot of issues to deal with.
Right.
As far as family, I did go through divorce when I was young, and I knew that when the stress at home was there and it was job related, I did what a lot of officers do. They throw themselves into the job and just stay working all the time, so they don't have to deal with the issues at home.
Right.
So I know it cost me one marriage.
Right.
So that's a pretty big effect to me.
Yeah. Would you say that stress affects all officers equally, or is it dependent upon the officer, or just?
I think it has a lot to do with the individual officer. I mean, we all have our own different personalities. Some people deal with certain things, like a divorce, different than another person would deal with a divorce. One person can deal with seeing a dead body better than another person can see a dead body.
Right.
You know what I mean? It all depends on the individual and what their perception, if you will, of each thing that they deal with. There's some things that bother me more than other things, and I can talk to my partner for the night, and that thing that really gets to me won't get to him, in the same way.